This is Abby Lincoln Moseka. When I come to Kalamazoo, I listen to Bright Moments.
This is Bobby McFerrin. Listen to Bright Moments, Bright Moments, Bright Moments, Bright Moments, Bright Moments, Bright
Moment, bright moment, bright moment, bright moment, bright. These bright moments is for all the very wonderful people in the universe that has never known anything about bright moments. So check it out.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
What you say?
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
Oh woman, don't treat me so mean. You're the meanest old woman that I've ever seen. I guess if you say so, I'll have to pack my things and go.
That's right, hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
What you say?
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
Now baby, listen baby, don't you treat me this away, 'cause I'll be back on my feet someday.
Don't care if you do, 'cause it's understood. You ain't got no money, you just ain't no good.
Well, I guess if you say so, I'll have to pack my things and go.
That's right, hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
What you say?
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
Well,
Don't you come back no more.
what you said?
Don't you come back no more.
I didn't understand
Don't
it.
you come back no more.
You can't mean that.
And don't you come back
Oh, now baby, please.
Don't you come back no more.
What you trying to do to me?
Come back no more.
Ray Charles starts off this final edition of Bright Moments with Hit the Road, Jack. You're listening to Bright Moments, great black music, ancient to future. My name is Rob Backus. While this is the final show of Bright Moments, I think it's scientifically correct to say that Bright Moments will be going on forever, in the fact that radio waves enter the outer space area, so to speak, and continue on forever. My theory of heaven and hell is that people involved in radio, depending on what they do, they have to spend eternity out there in space listening to their own broadcasts over and over again. Because of that, rather than going through a lengthy monologue about the reasons I've decided to pull Bright Moments from WIDR, I'd rather not have to listen to that forever, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the last show. Started off with Ray Charles because that's kind of where I started from. I grew up I was born in 1946, and so Ray Charles started to become popular, especially with his modern sounds and country and western music albums that were wildly successful in the early 60s. But he was quite popular before then, and my father grew up on a farm and was very much into country and western music. Our tastes never really coincided much, but on Ray Charles it did, partly because Ray was doing country and western material at the time. So that was something that we had in common. We certainly didn't have Coltrane in common. But I was trying to figure out what it was that really attracted me to black music. And in thinking back on it, I think it was the scream, Ray Charles and his scream.
I'm Miss Margie Hendricks, and the Ray Lance will help us do a tune called Tell the Truth. One, two, 3, 4.
Tell the truth, ba-ba-ba-ba. Tell the truth, ba-ba-ba-ba. Well, you know you can make me do what you want me to. Tell the truth, ba-ba-ba-ba. Tell the truth, ba-ba-ba-ba. Well, you know you can make me do what you want me to.
They're gonna
Loving you, the feeling started, but I'm gonna stop it.
whoa now, whoa and down the ball. I'm alright. Hey now, Stop lying! Stop lying! Woo! 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 Yeah, baby, the note said, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, yeah, and tell the truth. What about that man you were with last night, baby? I wanna know. Ooh, baby, yeah. Oh, baby, come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Every day of your life, baby. Tell the truth. Yeah.
Ray Charles, with help from the Raylettes, recorded live May 28, 1959, in Herndon Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. That was Ray Charles doing his own, no, it wasn't his own, written by Loman Pauling, Tell the Truth. And as embarrassing as it's going to be, I'm going to tell the truth, too. Looking back at myself when I'm a teenager, early high school, I'm hearing this scream, and I was very attracted to this, and I was attracted, I went back and listened to earlier Ray Charles after that. I had the good sense to go backwards in time there. But I'm trying to figure out what it was that attracted me to it and what I was looking for. And I think that part of it is the scream is, you have to be very self-confident to scream, because in a way screaming is also very honest emotion, and if you hide your emotions, to scream would, to create an uproar or whatever, is very difficult. And I was attracted to that because I was the last person on earth at that time that would scream about anything. I was very reserved, I believe. And so I looked at Ray Charles, and I looked at the blues and these things, and I made the same mistake that many white Americans have made, or maybe people throughout the world, as to idealize that and look at black music as a representative of a more pure, primitive state where people can scream, thinking that screaming is raw and primitive. At the end of October here on Bright Moments, I did a show on the Beat Generation, and I think the ideas behind some of the practitioners of the Beat Generation were as wildly off base as I was. Norman Mailer wrote a long treatise called The White Negro, and Jack Kerouac was continually celebrating the Negro as the pure, holy, primitive, or something. He really had an idealized misconception. We'll leave it that way. And in my early years, I had the same misconception, partly probably from reading beatnik literature. But also it was from really not having much contact with African Americans. So the only contact I really had was music. There weren't too many African Americans on TV at the time, or in the movies. So that was about the only avenue. Luckily, it was all over the radio, although some years you really had to search for it. In the early years, you could find a version of the scream. Probably the earlier version that attracted me was the scream of exuberance rather than the scream of pain or ecstasy, but just flat out exuberance.
Womp bom balloon bom 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 to the boot, oh Rude, 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 to the boot, oh Rude. Oh womp bom balloon bom 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 bom. I got a girl named Sue. She knows just what to do. I got a girl named Sue. She knows just what to do. She rock to the east. She rock to the west, but she's the gal that I love best. To the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy, ooh, to the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy. Oh, wop, bop, loom, bop, lump, bum, bum. I got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. Got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. She knows how to love me, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what she do to me. To the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy, ooh, to the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy. Pop, pop, pop. Got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. Got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. She knows how to love me, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what she do to me. To the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy, ooh, to the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy, to the booty, oh Rudy. Oh, bop, bop, loom, bop, lop, bam, boom.
Little Richard, Tutti Frutti. Now, I'm old enough to remember Elvis Presley when he was on Ed Sullivan. I was in grade school at the time. I remember seeing it vaguely. I remember the big to-do over Elvis, and so consequently I grew up listening to the rise of rock and roll. And one of the problems that I had, but I didn't know it at the time, was I wasn't hearing everything that was going on. Because in Kalamazoo, we didn't exactly hear everything everybody else heard. I grew up here. And consequently, a lot of times we heard cover versions of the real thing. And one of the, I read a short interview or something, I can't remember where I saw it, but Pat Boone was trying to make a place for himself in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, feeling that he belonged there as well because he felt that he helped make rock and roll respectable. Pat, as good as you were in the movie Roger and Me, I still have to say, you're dead wrong. Rock and roll was never supposed to be respectable.
Bop, bop, a loom, bop, 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 tutti frutti, all Rudy. 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 A bop, bop, a loom, bop, 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 bop. I got a gal, her name's Sue. She knows just what to do. I got a gal, her name's Sue. She knows just what to do. I've been to the east, I've been to the west, but she's the gal that I love best. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Ooh, tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. A wop, bop, a loom, bop, 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 bop. I got a gal, her name's Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. I got a gal, her name's Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. She's a real gone cookie, yes sirree. But pretty little Susie is the gal for me. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Ooh, tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. A bop, bop, a loom, bop, 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 bop. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Ooh, tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. A bop, bop, a loom, bop, 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 bop. I got a gal named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. I got a gal, her name's Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. She's a real gone cookie, yes sirree. But pretty little Susie is the gal for me. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Ooh, tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. Tutti frutti, all Rudy. A wop, bop, a loom, bop, a lop, and boom.
Jenny, 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 won't you come along with me? Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, 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 oh, won't you come along with me? Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, Jenny, you know that I love when we can live so happily. Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, Jenny, spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it like a spinning top. Spin it, spin, oh, spin it, spin, spin it, spin it, spin, spin it like a spinning top. Spin it, spin, oh, spin it, spin, a crazy little part. You ought to see us real and rock. Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, 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 you know that you my girl. Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, 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 I know that you my girl. Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, Jenny, you know that I need. I buy you diamond rings and pearls. Jenny, Jenny. Won't you come along with me, Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny, 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 oh, won't you come along with me, Jenny, Jenny, oh, Jenny Jen, you know that I love when we can live so happily. Jenny Jen, ooh, Jenny Jen, spin it, spin it, spin, spin like a spinning top, spin it, spin, ooh, spin it, ooh, spin it, spin it, spin, spin it like a spinning top, spin it, spin, ooh, spin it, spin, a crazy little fun, the auto feels real and rock. Jenny Jen, ooh, Jenny Jen, Jenny, Jenny Jen, you know that you my girl, Jenny Jen, ooh, Jenny Jen, ooh, Jenny, Jenny Jen, you know that you my girl, Jenny, Jenny Jen, you know that I need, I buy you diamond rings and girl.
Hey, 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 my, my. Hey, 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 my. Danny's got a pony so that Jenny can ride.
recorded live in Amsterdam, August of 1979. That was not Jimi Hendrix, that was Link Wray doing his own composition, Rumble. And before that, Los Lobos from their new LP, or, yeah, it's still LP. They still put records out. The Neighborhood, wonderful LP. Before that, well, what we heard was Jenny's Got a Pony. And the excitement of that, to me, that particular song by Los Lobos, it reminds me of the uplifting quality, the wonderfulness that rock and roll has in one of its forms. Before that, we heard Little Richard doing Jenny Jenny, and unfortunately started the whole set off with the entire version of Pat Boone's recording of Tutti Frutti. Good taste would have cut that short, but I had to live through it, and I thought it would be a historical, well, give you a sympathy for us old folks that we had to hear that. I remember I had some friends over on the eastern part of the state when I was growing up, and I'd go spend a week over there with Billy and Betty and their parents. And one of the exciting things when I'd go over there was I could hear Detroit radio. That's when I heard a lot of Little Richard that I did not hear here in Kalamazoo. One of the interesting things about radio as I was growing up, especially in the early years of rock and roll, was the top, I think they called it the top 10 back then, and then it expanded to the top 40. But anything was on there. Link Wray, the reason I played Link Wray is because he's a Native American guitar player, and he had a hit with the song Rumble back in the 50s. So you could have Link Wray doing Rumble, you could have Richie Valens doing La Bamba. Actually, the flip side, Donna, was the big hit at the time, but La Bamba snuck through too. Along with Bert Kaempfert, I can't remember the name of his instrumental stuff. You get Percy Faith things, Johnny Cash, even Slim Harpo had a hit, a blues hit, "Raining in My Heart." Anything was on. There was it was pretty exciting, actually. And when you're first listening to music, like in elementary school and stuff, you have no personal taste. You like just about everything, generally. So that was interesting back in those days, but things certainly started changing. Things were changing with the Pat Boone covers and everything. But a very good friend of mine, Mike Galbraith, always pulled my coat to some interesting things, and in part this final show, let me say this, that this final show is dedicated to Mike Galbraith, and most importantly to my wife and daughter, who have supported me through all these years of doing Bright Moments. Thank you very much. You're listening to Bright Moments on WIDR 89.1 FM in Kalamazoo, and opinions expressed on Bright Moments may not necessarily be those of this radio station, the staff of this radio station, or Western Michigan University. I take full responsibility for the content of Bright Moments. Anyway, Mike Galbraith, my friend now and back then, back in high school, junior high school, turned me on to this wonderful radio station way over on the right end of the dial, WLAC, Nashville, Tennessee. And we used to listen to the voice of John R.
Talk to me.
Hey, Honor, this is John R., and that's James Brown talking to you, talking and singing about Little Willie John from his brand new album entitled A Few Nice Things. Talk to me, James.
Talk to me.
It's at your record store right now. James Brown's newest hit album and his greatest. James Brown, thinking about Little Willie John and A Few Nice Things.
Don't wait.
This is a tribute to Little Willie John, pioneer of soul. A tribute from James Brown, the king of soul. Just voted the year's #1 male vocalist. And here's his newest, greatest album, featuring
A
Cottage for Sale, Talk to Me, Bill Bailey, plus 9 more. Grab it for yourself, honey. Give it for Christmas. James Brown's newest King album, thinking about Little Willie John and a few nice things. On sale at your store right now.
I said, if you leave me, I'll go crazy. 'Cause I know it's true now. You got the power. And I want you to try me. 'Cause I don't mind. Don't leave me bewildered. 'Cause this old heart can't stand no more. And if you leave me, there's only one thing I can do now. There's only one thing I can say. There's only one thing I can do now. There's only one thing I can say. There's only one thing I can say. I love someone. My love. Someone who's greater than a star. Oh, someone I need. Someone who don't let my heart bleed. Someone, that's someone. That's the someone. That's the someone that I love. There are little strangers come around to me. I love it tomorrow. I love it today. Help me, help me. I'm so weak. Gee whiz, I love you. I'm so weak. I love you tomorrow. I love you tomorrow. I love you tomorrow. I love you tomorrow. But oh yeah. But oh yeah. But come on now. Come on now. Come on now. Sometime I get a little trouble. Sometime I get a little trouble. But let me hear you say yeah. Let me hear you say yeah. Say it a little bit louder. Say it a little bit louder. I love you tomorrow. I love. I want you to come on. I want you to come on. I need your love so bad now. I need your love so bad now. I just want you. I love you tomorrow. I love you. I love you tomorrow. I just want you. I love you tomorrow. I love you. I love somebody. Help me somebody. Help me somebody. I love you tomorrow. I love someone. A million to one. 10,000 people out of my fire. Someone needs someone. Someone, the only one. Just that someone, we need someone now. Under the sun. Care for, to care for, just that someone now. Yeah. Now I got something I want to tell everybody. And I got something I want everybody to understand now. You know we all make mistakes sometimes. And the only way we can correct our mistakes, we got to try one more time. So I got to sing the song to you one more time. Now I want you to know I'm not singing a song for myself now. I'm not singing a song only for myself now. I'm singing it for you too. And when I said something that makes you feel good inside, when I said that little thing, I said that little part that might sting you in your heart now, I want to hear you scream. I want to hear you say, ow! I want to hear you say, ow! Don't just say, ow, say, ow! And I believe my work will be done. Tomorrow, just like I love you today. I'm so weak, I don't take my heart away. Ow. But come on, gee whiz, I love you, and don't go to strangers. But come out home to me. Come out home to me. And I don't want you to go to see my next door neighbor. But I'll feel a little better if you come on to me. You don't have to tell me, but I believe somebody over here alone. Someone. And I believe somebody out here alone. Someone. And I believe somebody over there alone. Someone. I said it's getting a little cold outside. I wonder, do you know what I'm talking about? I said it's getting a little cold outside. And everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody. You know I like to sing this song.
Go on, sing the song.
I said I like to sing this song.
Go on, sing the song.
It makes me think about the good things make me think about the good things. It make me think about the good things. Ow! Shucks! I feel all right. I feel so good I want to scream. I want to scream. I feel just like I want to scream. But
From October 24th, 1962, James Brown recorded live at the Apollo, and that's my copy that I ordered from Randy's Record Mart. I sent away mail order from listening to WLAC Nashville, Tennessee, and that's what Randy's Record Mart was one of the sponsors. Records held up pretty good, both culturally and the actual plastic or vinyl still works. Cover shot. But James Brown, the ultimate scream, I felt at the time, trying to penetrate the search for the holy scream. And actually that's what it was. And it was a lot deeper and more complex than I had originally envisioned it. The scream was not primitive. It was very deep. And I found that out by my friend Mike, and I started getting into jazz. Again, Mike was kind of led the way in that. We listened to Charles Mingus in 1964. And in 1965, in the summer, we went to Chicago together to the Downbeat Jazz Festival held in Soldier Field. And actually that was one of the many, everybody has ultimate bright moments. That was one of them. And the ultimate one was seeing John Coltrane. He was there with his classic quartet, plus guest Archie Shepp. And they did one song, and at the time I wasn't familiar with the song, but in reading about it in one of the books, apparently the song that he performed was Nature Boy. I was just getting into jazz. This was some pretty intense territory, and John Coltrane could scream through his saxophone. But I was still having trouble really getting a handle on what it was about. And they all did, they started the song out, and then everybody did solos, and Coltrane took the last solo. And he stepped up to the microphone, and from where we were sitting, he loomed huge up on stage. And it was like all that immensity crouched down and was as much force as he could deliver was screaming into the saxophone, and the note was so intense, but at the same time you could hardly hear it. It was so high. I'll never forget that. And it was a new version of the scream, and here he is playing one of his renditions of Nature Boy, John Coltrane. John Coltrane, Nature Boy. Now, quite a few years later, my wife and I were in Chicago visiting her sister, and we were out in the car, and I was spinning the dial, and I caught the middle of this incredible scream. I had no idea what was going on. I kept it there and discovered gospel music.
Well, I'm crying, hallelujah, yes, I'm crying, hallelujah. For I was blind, so blind, but he made me see. Yes, I'm crying, hallelujah. Lift him up, way up, in a blaze of glory. In a choir of voices. Hallelujah.
From the Gospel at Colonus LP, that was Lift Him Up, the institutional radio choir with Carolyn Johnson White, the soloist. And with the gospel music, I felt that I had come pretty close to the source of the scream, and I realized that no way could I even call it a scream anymore. It was so complex beyond that. Opera singers don't scream, but these gospel singers were in the same league. It was not a scream. And as a matter of fact, it's nothing you can put a label on. You can't label it. You can't put words on it. There's no way. It comes from the deepest part of the human experience. And in this case, it came out of the African American historical experience. And for the rest of my days, I will be searching for the essence of that. That's what I used to call scream. And I realize that in large part, it is the sound of devotion to the Creator of us all. It's not a scream. I had a chance to talk with Stuart Dybeck back in August, and this is what he had to say. And after that, I'm going to do an extended solo on my own composition. Did radio have much of an impact on you?
Oh, my God, a tremendous impact, yeah. It was, an alternative world was available by just flicking a dial. And I think it had as strong an effect as any other thing I could name, because it was on radio that I first really began hearing music, the kind of music that was a path, an alternative path to an alternative view of the world to the one that was being pretty much offered to me in this ethnic neighborhood I grew up in. You know, and it a lot of prejudices and stuff that you picked up on the street. You could see that the music told you they were lies. And once you realize that, then you realize that you had to make sure to seek out all the other kinds of alternative ways of knowing and thinking about things. Otherwise, you would fall into this vice-like mental trap that seemed ready and waiting for kids grown up.
I love radio. I love the magic of its possibilities. I love how it's like an invisible spirit that travels through the air and through sound touches people. Sometimes it changes people. It's magic. When I was in junior high and high school in the late 50s and early 60s, at night I would spin the dial, sending feelers out over great distances, searching. Searching for what? For the outside world, for experience beyond Kalamazoo, which was an insular valley. I could get wackiness from Chicago, Wally Phillips with his goofy sound effects and Holcomb on WGN, or the new music, the new Top 40 on WLS, music we would hear months later on local stations. I was young and attending a school system that was for all practical purposes segregated. I went to Loy Norrix, which was called the Country Club, and due to its boundaries, it was segregated by money and geography, and the geography of Kalamazoo was segregated by race. There was a heroic spirit loose in the land. People were standing up for their rights. Black people were saying enough, and progressive white people were joining up because it was the right thing, and it was teaching them what the word democracy was about. Being an insular valley community, Kalamazoo was years behind this movement. At night, I would move my dial to the right end and plug into the spirit of this movement that was shaking the nation. I could find it on WLAC, Nashville, Tennessee. Between the commercials for Randy's Record Mart and Red Top Baby Chicks, between the platter and the patter of Hoss Allen and John R., who many of us mistakenly thought were black announcers, between all of this burst forth the music that was a cultural expression in sound, though not necessarily in words, although sometimes between the words, of the struggle for democracy. It would literally take years for these musicians to be played on local stations, but I was hearing the explosive music of James Brown, Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, Rufus Thomas. It excited me. It educated me. It changed me. Make no mistake about it. The struggle for civil rights was and continues to be the struggle for quote-unquote minorities to gain equal rights. But the side effect is that it also frees us all. It frees us from ignorant prejudice. The burden of inequality insidiously poisons the privileged, the majority, because they are living a lie. The truth shall set you free. I hate radio. I hate what business has done to radio. The business of selling music, the business of breaking music down into labels, the business of determining what label of music will sell the most units, appeal to most consumers, what music will appeal to potential advertisers. Ultimately, of course, I love music. Radio is a medium for music to flow through, but music has the power to cast aside these pitiful labels because music speaks directly to the human spirit. Unfortunately, the musicians don't have power over the business of labeling music, although in many cases recently they have been organizing to do such. The shows that I did on M-Bass, I think, is a pretty good example of that. But the music industry has the power to label. Since the 60s, the industry has determined that it is possible to and profitable to divide and sell, a variation of divide and conquer. Demographics, not democracy. Demographics are ultimately about money, who has it, and who doesn't. Demographics led American radio back to the radio apartheid of the late 70s and into the 80s. Entire radio stations targeted to specific demographical groups. I love music. It is a form of culture, although as we can see for some it's merely a form of commerce. Welling up from the deepest human emotions, music has a power words can only hint at. Culture is ultimately deeper than commerce. Music is Gulliver shackled down by the puny ropes of commerce. Musicians do not know boundaries. Although aware of national or so-called racial boundaries, musicians deal in the true democracy of art. In my 2 discussions with Wynton Marsalis, I was made even more aware of this fact. The first time I interviewed him, I asked him to do a promo for Bright Moments. What's the name of the show, Bright Moments? It's subtitled Great Black Music, Ancient Future. WIDR. Not going to say that? How come?
Well, I don't believe that in stuff like black music. I don't believe that a generic race term should be put on music. And it is a generic race term in the most generic sense. And when this era is past, it'll look just as stupid as it is. So I don't really...
That's fine. The reason we use it is because we wanted to pay homage to where the music originated from. Because sometimes it seems to me people tend to not understand that, the culture that it came out of.
But nobody knows where music originates from. And the music has many different influences. And if you listen to the Jelly Roll Morton Library of Congress tapes, he makes it very clear that it's a combination of many sensibilities that produce this music. And I feel that using these type of terms, just they work to the service of the same type of racism that is trying to fight against. And I just don't believe in this kind of stuff any more than I believe that Beethoven's music was white, or Bach, or any great musician. They're making a human statement. And if it was a racial thing, then everybody in whatever the particular race would all be able to play. And then another thing is that a term like black, I mean, nobody even knows what that is. What degree of Negro blood does somebody have to have in them to be black? Where does that put somebody like Jelly Roll Martin? I mean, I guess he wasn't really great, or Lester Young. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think what I was trying to do, I mean, I borrowed that from the Art Ensemble of Chicago, the phrase, but just to understand, I mean, it strikes me that the music came out of the African American experience in the United States, and we always try to point to most of the major innovators were African Americans, and we wanted to ensure that, because a lot of times, an example would be at the malls, there isn't the percentage of African American albums even available in the jazz selection. Strikes me as rather low, you know.
Yes, but I mean, that's another problem. That's an educational problem. It's a sociological problem. We have a cultural problem, not a race problem. Race is physiological. In terms of music, culture is not physiological. It's just culturally, we have to come to grips with being American, and that means for the blacks and the white people, white, black, green, and you know, after a while, man, you get tired of it. And things like this don't serve any purpose. It's not going to illuminate anything about the music. What does that mean? That Louis Armstrong, as an individual, he's a Negro, American Negro. And many white trumpet players imitated him and got as much out of his sound. People like Bunny Berrigan. In no way Bix Beiderbecke, in no way are these musicians on his level, but that's an individual thing. Because they're on a higher level than a lot of Negro trumpet players. They just want Louis Armstrong. And for some reason, whenever a Negro innovates something, it becomes black. I mean, when we were studying in school about the airplane, it wasn't a white invention. It was Wilbur Wright's and Orville Wright's invention. You know what I'm saying? In our music, it's a black music. And that's just not what's happening. It would help the whole country if they would come to grips with how this music illuminates American mythology. And maybe one day we'll get to it.
What do you mean by that? How it illuminates American mythology?
Well, the music is about what our nation is supposed to stand for all Americans, white, black, green, and it is by necessity the combination of different sensibilities, European as well as African. And the music, like something like the blues, you can hear the blues in Japanese and Chinese music. The percussive aspects, the doo-boo doo-bee da boo dee boo wee woo dee oh. That could have been some Japanese music I was singing. And the type of improvisatorial conception that comes out of African music, and the form conception that comes out of European music. The type of communal audience musician interaction that's in African music, and the type of concert composer individual to listeners audience relationship that's in European music. The type of conception of group virtuosity that's found in African music in timbre combined with the European conception of instrumental virtuosity in group performance. Like Jelly Roll Martin would describe how the early New Orleans band functioned like march music, which comes out of the European tradition. So can we overlook that? Well, we can't use these European things because they don't fit into what we're saying. Now, by necessity, not by necessity, but jazz is the logical extension of European music. Because in like, let's say if you have the sound of trumpet, then in jazz music you have Louis Armstrong and Ray Nance and Clark Terry, all of these people have individual styles, and they give an individual meaning to the word trumpet. So they extend the proposition of a trumpet. And by the same token, you have Duke Ellington, who had an orchestra of people who all extended the propositions of their individual instruments that existed in European music with the exception of the drum. And indeed, even the conception of composition and performance is extended and refined, because in European music you have the composer who writes, and then you play exactly what's written, and you play trumpet. Then you have Duke Ellington, who writes pieces for Ray Nance playing trumpet. And also you can play in solo and contribute your own to it, just like in our democracy is supposed to be. You balance individual responsibilities and individual rights and freedoms with the community. It's a combination of the European sensibility and the African sensibility.
It's a great combination.
Yes. You're listening to Bright Moments, Sunday at 6 o'clock, WIDR 89.1 FM. Hope you're enjoying us.
Last June, I interviewed Winton again in his hotel room, and there was a book called The Music of Africa laying open on his bed. After the interview, which I, to be honest, really steered clear of any of the previous disagreement, it was like he remembered where we had left off. African music, it has the elements of Arabic music, and on he went. And he's right. But I still kept the subtitle Great Black Music, Ancient to Future, because I think, in truth, you'll find many paradoxes, and I'm going to get to this in a little bit, but when I got a little older, I found a radio station out of Rochester, New York, WHAM, and after 11 o'clock, Harry Abraham would come on and play 3 hours of jazz, the only jazz I would hear on the radio for years. And he always would say, "You're listening to the best of all possible worlds." He's right. Music is the best of all possible worlds. No boundaries, and represents the highest aspirations of the human spirit. But we don't live in the best of all possible worlds. The world we live in is beset by boundaries. So although I agree with Winton, and always actually have at base, I still call the show Great Black Music, Ancient to Future. I do this because I want to single out the amazing contribution of African Americans to our culture being, one, American, and two, deeper still, human. I do this as an antidote to the way the music has been treated here in America, its home port. I say all this to say what? I love radio, but I've already said that. I feel fortunate to have been on radio from the other side, hopefully sending out the magic. I was grateful to be on a college radio station. College radio is the last frontier. It's still possible for freedom to take place on these stations. The music industry looks at college radio as the final holdout, the untamed, underdeveloped country to be somehow conquered. In many cases across the land, college radio has become the minor league for the music industry. How is this done? Lists, data, labels, the label college radio. Many media publications have college radio lists. The most mass media publication would be Rolling Stone, and they have a top 10 college radio list. And I use that as an example because that's what most people would run across rather than the more specific music publications. The music industry is getting ready for the mop-up operation. They are defining college radio, and power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. There's a catch. How many minority artists are ever in these college radio top 10 lists? If you're familiar with the lists, then the answer is obvious. All you need to do is any week, or however it comes on, any other week or whatever, just look at Rolling Stone's list. The answer is very apparent. Also want to point out, before I go any further, I'm not anti-business. I understand needs for lists and labels for the purpose of selling products. And without the business community, we wouldn't have access to the many artists around the globe that we have come to love and also come to need. But the bottom line is, whose bottom line? The bottom line of business demanding the highest profit, or the bottom line of human beings being afforded access to culture? College radio is the final frontier where commerce doesn't call the shots. There's still freedom. But with freedom comes responsibility. You can't have one without the other to balance it out. Otherwise, we're back to the Wild West. That mentality. Cars with stars and bars, license plates, and shit happens, bumper stickers, and the attitude of, I'm an American, nobody can tell me what to do. True patriotism concerns the understanding of the common good and the responsibility that entails. America stands at a crossroads, as it somehow always does. Democracy somehow attracts crossroads. One of the most important questions that will be played out in the future, and the future is now, is, can America be a multicultural democracy? What is a multicultural democracy? I can answer that by saying what a multicultural democracy is not. It is not a melting pot. It is the interaction of different cultural backgrounds, each borrowing from one another while at the same time distinct and solid. You can look at the art world for some examples of borrowing, because the borrowing, it abounds. Picasso and African art, the Impressions and Japanese woodblock prints. Even in the European classical music, you have borrowings from all over the place. They even borrowed from America. Dvorak and New World Symphony comes from African American spirituals. But there's a difference between borrowing and outright stealing. When you borrow, you pay back. The history of rock and roll is most informative in this respect. Books in the thousands have been written about it, so I'll generalize. Rock and roll began as several cultures interacting. It arose at the same time as the civil rights struggle. It had elements of a multicultural perspective. However, as it developed, one culture assumed nearly total dominance, that being the European American culture. Who's to blame for this? Certainly not the musicians. The Rolling Stones have consistently shared their stage with the originators. The problem comes from the way the music business has promoted the music. It is now to the point where when you say rock and roll, you think white music, which is an idea that's being forcefully confronted by groups such as Los Lobos or Living Color or many other groups. That strange phenomena that I ran across constantly at the old Ann Arbor Jazz and Blues festivals of a usually drunken white guy standing up and demanding, rock and roll, play rock and roll. The history of rock and roll is a history of one culture taking control and dominating another culture. It's a sad, sorry story. It is not the story of multicultural democracy. Multicultural democracy is about respect for the individual characteristics of each culture. Culture is inherently democratic in that at bottom it speaks to the universal human condition. But culture also carries different characteristics that come about through distinctly different historical experiences of separate groups of people. In the best of all possible worlds, each individual culture is treated as equals, respected for the individual manner that it, as a culture, through its own course, has added to the whole. However, we don't live in the best of all possible worlds, and all cultures are not treated equally. A large percentage of the music that we hear through the popular medium has its roots in the African American culture. If you trace the music down from the leaves and branches, down the trunk, down to the roots, it comes from African American experience. It doesn't matter that the king of jazz was Paul Whiteman, the king of swing Benny Goodman, the king was Elvis Presley. The roots are the experience of the African interacting with the European in the New World. It is a historical fact of racism that has kept the African American culture separate and thus determined a separate, distinct culture. One growing trend in African American culture is that of Afrocentricity. For some reason, this term scares many people. The group Public Enemy is valuable because they take the fears out of the closet and put them on the stage for all to see. Fear of a black planet. The extreme of Eurocentricity is, quote, white culture and white people are better, unquote. The extreme of Afrocentricity is, quote, black culture and black people are better, unquote. Luckily, in the makeup of societies, the numbers of individuals at the extreme are small. Unluckily for some societies is that in some cases these small numbers take control of the society as a whole for a time. The main thrust of Afrocentricity is not a negative we're better direction. The main point is a well-deserved feeling of self-respect, to look back upon the gifts and achievements brought to the world stage by African-originating peoples, to look back on the cultural values of one's predecessors, one's ancestors, and feel the power and pride of their accomplishments. As a European American, I don't feel threatened by this. That African Americans or Native Americans or Hispanic Americans want their achievements respected and treated equally is no threat to me. I want to see a multicultural society to develop, a democracy based on equal respect for each other's cultures, where we can learn from each other respectfully. The farther we are able to travel away from the almost incestuous quest for purity, the better we will all be. When one borrows from another culture, then that person has the responsibility to respect that culture. To respect it, one must study it, know how the culture came to be, and what makes it distinct. One last point I'd like to make has to do with labels. If you think back how generations are labeled, you have the lost generation of the 20s, the beat generation of the 50s, the love generation of the 60s, the me generation, etc. These labels are put on different generations of Americans, yet who do they refer to? All Americans or only European Americans? If we have to label generations, which I hope we don't, perhaps my daughter's generation or maybe her offspring's generation will maybe come to a point where it's an all-inclusive label, like, say, the American generation. A generation that understands we all come from different sources, but we no longer need to hyphenate the source because each source is treated equal in stature. And a few generations down the road from then, maybe they'll quit labeling generations. The last labeled generation being the International Brother-Sisterhood of Human Being generation. Now that would be the best of all possible worlds, and could you imagine the music?
Where has the time all gone to? Haven't done half the things we want to. Oh, well, we'll catch up some other time. this day was just a token. So many words are still unspoken. We'll catch up some other time. Just when the fun is starting, comes a time for parting. But let's be glad for all we